represents a sort of beating commercial heart of New York, but also because of the number of people that would be gathered there at any one time who could be potential targets for an attack. So these bollards are installed deliberately, and they're very strong, as you can imagine. They're designed to withstand the shock of or the impact of a vehicle being driven into them. So somehow this car has managed to hit something en route that's flipped it up, and that's ended up with its precarious position now stuck on top of these bollards. It looks like it's crushed the one at the front there, as you can see, just below the front engine, and then the chassis of the vehicle is being held up by, at least it looks like, a couple of bollards, one on the rear wheel and one on the chassis and the middle there. It's being inspected by police. Other pictures we have from the scene are of more chaotic scenes, as a lot of people obviously were gathered there, and there were descriptions by eyewitnesses of the panic and chaos that ensued as this vehicle drove into Times Square at some speed and then drove onto the pavement and hit a number of people on the way.
Dominic, the very latest we're hearing from the emergency services in New York City, specifically from the fire department, is that there have been 13 people have been injured after the car struck pedestrians. The New York broadcaster NBC News is now citing a senior official confirming those reports of one individual being killed. But as you were mentioning earlier, I mean, there is a tourist magnet, isn't it, in the heart of New York City. The numbers could have been far, far higher, particularly if those reports of the car driving against the traffic, driving at speeds, are to be believed.
Yeah, I mean, it's midday. It was around midday when this happened in New York. It's May. It's springtime in New York. It's a very popular time to come to New York. So, as well as the numbers of office workers who'd be out for an early lunch, you're going to have a lot of tourists, a lot of visitors coming to New York at this time of year. And Times Square is one of the places you go to. If you go to New York, it's on your list of places to see. It's right in the heart of the theatre district. It's in a commercial district as well of New York. It's where a lot of people would be. And so I think had the vehicle managed to get past those bollards, it would have been able to strike a lot more. But I mean, if we're hearing that 13 people have been injured, that's a considerable number of people already.
Dominic, we'll just pause there for a second to bring the latest footage that we have. We believe this to be the moment of arrest. CBS New York now confirming that perhaps as many as 20 people have been injured in Times Square, one person killed. However, in terms of, as we look at that individual being dragged away pretty quickly from that red sedan, the CBS broadcaster is suggesting that this incident is not connected to terrorism. They're citing New York City police as a source. Let's just look again, as clearly the police have grabbed the driver from the vehicle. Very difficult to make out on this screen that I'm looking at nationality, ethnicity, and how in fact they managed to pull him from the car. But as you can see there, it's still smoking, so clearly that happens very briefly. It does appear, however, that they are taking him from perhaps a slightly different direction. So whether or not that meant that he managed to exit the car before the police managed to get hold of him, or whether they actually plucked him from the vehicle itself. But now, let's just reiterate the very latest that we have here. The CBS broadcast in the United States suggesting that this is not terror-related. That information they are citing as coming to them from the NYPD. But in terms of those who have been injured, one person is reported to have died, and perhaps as many as 20 people have been injured. But as we once again look at these pictures from Times Square, the speeds with which that vehicle would have had to been travelling to be able to get onto that bollard there, one of the security devices that are in place around many, if not all, of the high-rise buildings that are dotted around the heart of New York. It would be considerable, but as you can see, those bollards can take a huge amount of weight on top of them. Let us bring back in Sky's Dominic Waghorn, who's been watching these pictures with me. One presumes, Dominic, that these days New York City is essentially permanently on a state of high alert when it comes to incidents such as this.
Yeah, well, I think we live in a world where if a car mounts a pavement and hits a number of people, unfortunately we do assume the worst. And there have been a number of incidents that have vindicated that kind of scepticism when we look at these kind of pictures. But there are a number of possible explanations. One is this was an accident where the car was in a position where the driver lost control and was driving. What we do know is that obviously the vehicle was travelling at considerable speed, not just because of what eyewitnesses are saying, but because of the position it's ended up in. You can't end up in that position if you're just crawling through traffic. So the vehicle was travelling at speed. Was that because of some catastrophic failure of the accelerator or the brakes that meant the driver lost control and ended up in this situation? It could be that. It could be simply an accident. It could be a criminal escaping a fugitive from justice. That's possible as well. New York has its criminal problem has weakened over the years, but there's still a possibility that this was someone escaping law enforcement at speed. According to Fox News, one witness says the car was driving the wrong way before it hit pedestrians. So it was clearly moving in a way that was unconventional. Whether that was deliberate or whether it was because the driver had lost control or was escaping from law enforcement, obviously it's too early to say. Or the worst possible explanation is this was a terrorist attack. That's perfectly possible given what we've seen carried out in capital cities around the world, and given what we know about Times Square. If you're going to carry out a terrorist attack, it is a prime location for that, both because of its iconic reputation, because it's in the heart of the commercial part of New York. It'd be striking at what is very American, and because a lot of people are there. So there are a number of explanations which are all quite plausible. At the moment we simply don't know why this happened, but we've ended up with this extraordinary situation of a car propped up at this angle on the pavement in Times Square, and a number of people injured. And as you say, that number seems to be rising, as is sadly the case in these kind of incidents. It went from 10 to a dozen, now 13, some others saying up to 20 people injured, and according to a number of sources now, at least one person has died. That's not been confirmed or verified yet. And we've also had these pictures of what appears to have been the driver being arrested. As you were saying, Neil, he seems to be dragged by the police from a different part of Times Square. So he may well have crashed his vehicle if he was the driver, the pictures of which we've seen, and he may have run away from the vehicle, then been apprehended and then dragged back towards this police vehicle where he's arrested.
Dominic, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's just pause for a moment and just reflect on what we've been seeing there. The pictures, it would appear, of the man who was driving that car being arrested. We have, however, as you see at the bottom of your screen there, heard from New York Police Department. They believe, they are not treating the incident as terrorism related. However, as Dominic was mentioning, perhaps as many as 13 people, perhaps as many as 20 have been injured, and reports to be confirmed from the emergency services that one person has died as a result of that car mounting the pavement.